So next up, I would like to welcome our Executive Director, Julie Barrett O'Neill. Julie is the Executive Director here at LISC Western New York and has also had several roles in the city and doing a lot of this work in real time here in Buffalo. And she's going to do a bit of level setting, introducing us to kind of why we're gathered here today and what work is ripe in this space right now. So Julie, I see you're sharing your screen and we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Brittany. Can you just verify that we're showing this and it looks like a full, I'm just making sure I'm logged in. It shows like a regular presentation screen. Perfect. Lauren, thank you so much. We just got to know Lauren, I think last week, and here she landed in this incredible way for us. We talked a little bit in our initial call around the similarities between Detroit, Cleveland, and Buffalo. And, you know, she's there on the other side of our beautiful Lake Erie and so close, and having had so many similar experiences. I pulled a slide from another presentation while you were talking, because this is the way in which I come to this work myself, right? Like, I am a Buffalo native. My dad worked for this horrendous land raping steel company. My mom was East Side Polish, and I spent my days wandering around Paderewski and in the Central Terminal. So I have navigated so much of what is the Gen X white girl experience of Western New York's transition over the last, I'm not going to say how many years because it's longer than I'm going to admit publicly. But I say that because I think for those people who are here in Western New York, the narrative is very often around deficiency and around weakness and around abandonment. And really, because I had the good fortune of being raised here, and when Lauren was talking so much around social capital and around the ways that communities support each other, I have lived very intimately what happened when this community lost its steel industry. We were supported by our church and our family and the community members that brought us lasagnas and things when that stress level created illness in our household. And the way that this community just wraps around and loves one another. And that's really what guided and loved, you know, kind of brought me through my entire career. And so that fabric really of your talk really resonated with me. I also know that this community, anyone who's still here, or has chosen to do work here, are some of the most resilient, creative, entrepreneurial, strongest people I have ever met. It's not the easiest place to work. There's not just capital and funding raining in, you know, like from beautiful goddesses. We have to do more with fewer traditional or capitalistic resources. And that means that the people here are rich in terms of their capabilities. I am going to try to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time to keep us on this agenda, but I think a lot of things Lauren covered, so I'm going to zip along fairly quickly in some of those pieces. But I do want to introduce you to LISC because we have been in Buffalo for 20 years, and we're on our second chapter. I've been at LISC in an executive director position for 2 years now. Probably some of the hardest working and fastest 2 years of my life. And I'm really delighted that the team is in a position to come in and serve community in a new way, supported by advisors and funders and the most incredible pantheon of community members and organizations and partners. So for those of you who haven't met us yet, let me introduce ourselves. LISC is a national community and economic development organization, and we are the local office of that organization. And LISC works with community organizations and businesses and residents to really bridge neighborhoods with the resources they need to thrive. And this really comes from my experience in community organizing. It's hard work, and it's harder than it needs to be. And sometimes it feels like you're in one of those game rooms where you have to find like the secret code in order to be able to unlock the dollars and the secrets for how you get the work done. And LISC really does try to improve the transparency on that process, make the resources easier to access so that not every community member has to go through like reinventing the wheel and figuring this all stuff out, because the structures are hard. They're unnecessarily hard. And so we're trying to remove those barriers and really providing the tools faster and quicker and cheaper in a more generous way to our partners so that they can really build their vision. LISC is in 35 cities, but really they're all across the country doing work. And I mention this not because I have some romance with large corporations and they're like big footprints, but more because that means that we're learning in real time from communities and neighborhoods all over the country. And we have a beautiful infrastructure where if I pop up a question that says, hey, has somebody done X? I can tap into the collective wisdom of community organizers and neighborhoods and LISC partners from all over this country. And that's part of our value proposition to the neighborhood that we get to share and make connections with and for you. We went through a year-long strategic planning process in 2019 and really tried to identify how we could be most useful to this community. I have lived here for a long time, and like Lauren, I have watched national consultants come in to do a contract and deliver on a thing, maybe. And they're very wise and they've had a lot of experience, but LISC is here in community. We live here, we shop here, we bike here, we, walk our dogs and figure out how to remote school our kids like you are all navigating. And so we really don't believe in the Kool-Aid man philosophy of work where you just crash through the door and pretend like you know everything. That's not how we are going to do this. So we listened a lot, and this platform is really recognizing that there is a tremendous amount of great work going on by other people in the community. And the place where we thought we could add most value is in this circle. So really, again, investing deep in neighborhoods and building quality of life. Planning and really lifting up and kind of doing that bottom-up approach that Lauren was talking about. Working on affordable housing and really closing the racial housing wealth gap. Connecting neighborhood businesses to the incredible infrastructure that exists to support entrepreneurs and small businesses, but is very often excluding or not accessible to Black, Indigenous, and persons of color owned businesses. And then family income and wealth building, because we're never going to build enough affordable housing to really transition and address the poverty that has resulted from a long history of disinvestment and racism in our community. And we have a whole range of toolkits around this, but I should just mention that we're not frontline providers. We work to build the capacity of our partners and support them in doing this work. And so we really rely upon partnership to accomplish anything in this space. So the last piece is like, where are we working? And this is as much of an equity issue as anything else. And I think those of us who've kind of watched revitalization in Western New York have known that when we were really bottoming out, if you will, as an economy after, in the 80s, figuring out where to start when it felt like we were in free fall was an important piece of the puzzle. But those decisions meant that we left a lot of people behind. And so we are working to kind of take advantage of the recent move and long overdue move to really invest in Buffalo East Side. But we're trying to do our work in a way that is open source and collaborative and generous, because there are communities in need all across the city of Buffalo, in Erie and Niagara counties, in our rural, kind of neighbors, in Lockport and Jamestown and Chautauqua and Cattaraugus. And so we are trying to do our work in a way that allows us both to go deep and also not just shut the door so that somebody is left out. And in all of this work, in every aspect of LISC's organizational structure, there's a deep and pervasive commitment to racial equity. And this it's been heightened in the last 6 months, but it is certainly, you can ask most of our staff, one of the reasons why, they have all identified LISC's commitment to equity as one of the reasons why they joined the team in the first place, over the last 18 months. So this is not new work. It's part of the embedded values of LISC, and will be part of how we just interact with you in all ways. I think that Lauren covered the importance of equity. This is just a slide that glazes over it. This could be, this is our work. I think the building equity is the work. And in our recent local advisory committee meeting, we talked increasingly around just centering equity as the center and the anchor that really drives all of the rest of the work that we do in community, and that's both in process and in outcomes. And Lauren touched on so much of this. I'm not going to go deep into it. We also know that there are so many community members who have been actively working in equitable development efforts for many years now, and this goes back for ages. And I just want to lift that up because we know this is not new. We know that Buffalo has been doing incredibly creative work in this. I haven't even lifted the Cooperative Academy work that's taking place. It's deep and pervasive, and we want to celebrate that for each of our partners. So Lauren really talked a lot about what the development process typically looks like. And I have interacted with this space in a number of ways in my career. You know, you get the traditional private development, process where the public outreach comes way after they've got their early money and done all the stuff. They're going to check in, they're going to get your reaction to pieces, and then they're going to zip along, to get the rest of the project done. Same thing happens generally in traditional public projects. You have an election, then they go through all of their processes. It's a little bit more robust. There'll be some public hearings and some, through multiple phases of design, but by and large, it's a process that's just, detached from the community. My experience, I spent 6.5 years at City Hall, and I had I learned so much, but what I came to appreciate is that most of the drivers, both the private developers and the public developers, are working through structures and institutions that have very, very short timeframes and a lot of factors that drive why this process looks this way. It's the cost of money and needing, if you're in a public space, needing to deliver typically within 2.5 years, something that the community can say you've accomplished. And the reality is that neighborhood development is a much deeper, longer, intentional, messier process, quite frankly. And it takes moving from consultation all the way up through really involvement, collaboration, and empowerment. And this is it's more of a power building and trust exercise. And quite frankly, it's hard to do that deep work if you're an elected official on that really rapid time frame. It's just, it doesn't blend well because people, and quite frankly, the public discourse is such so that even when you're trying to do good work, there are people who are trying to, position themselves for power. And so you're trying to do this deep work within a context that's really not always supportive, even when there's good intention. If you're a private developer, it's not it's generally, if you're coming in as an investor, they don't perceive themselves as being responsible for dealing with all the ways a project could interact with a neighborhood. And Lauren showed us great slides on that, right? So they're doing their little project in the neighborhood, they can only do so much with their property. There's larger work that very often needs to be done in conjunction with and in coordination with that project, but they're developers. They're not, they may or may not have any capacity in doing this. They may not have any relationships in doing this. And so we really need to have a system and a support network and an infrastructure that takes advantage of those the longer perspective of the neighborhood in place, in placekeeping and community building. See, Lauren, we're learning in real time. and I just pulled this one here because, and this is one model for how you do this, but it's really also around trust building and iterating over and over again and learning as a community on how we do this better. So you're in one of those first exercises with us at LISC. And I give you that as context because we're in such an extraordinary moment. And I have lived through now 3 recessions in Buffalo. And this one's a real humdinger, for lack of a better word. This is a national economic crisis. And the dialogue that we will continue to see is that we need to safely and equitably resuscitate the economy if we're really going to move forward and help people. We know that having an income, having the dignity of a job is, and having meaningful work. And I have no romance with capitalism. I'm the daughter of a steelworker who, left us without, benefits and the land polluted for a long time. There's no romance here around capitalism, but I do know that having a job makes a big difference in our day-to-day lives. We need to be able to pay rent, and we need to be able to buy food, and we need health insurance for our families so that we can deliver our babies and take care of our parents. And so that often is connected to, you know, how we move in value and wealth. So very quickly, we're in this moment. And so we're coming to you, and I'm going to show you this slide because it really sets up the rest of this. We started this platform, and we're in this circle right here. You know, Brittany got hired in April in the middle of this, you know, pandemic. She's never actually worked a day with our LISC team in person because of COVID. And we started listening with neighbors in the summer and really connecting with the amazing community leaders who are doing great work, as well as, you know, the institutions that are trying to invest in these neighbors within this context of how development takes place traditionally. All of our leadership needs to come to the community and show some pathway forward for resuscitating this economy. Sorry about that back and forth. And there's a lot of pressure on. They have to deliver. That's what we want our leaders to do. That's what we're telling them to do. And so there's a moment right now for the neighborhood to really consider how and which projects really sit well with the neighborhood, really feel authentic for the neighborhood, things that are already within that big development pipeline that we might, quite frankly, massage a bit, maybe tweak a little bit, or prepare the community for in a way that will help us really make sure that development efforts will land in a way that's got integrity and support for the community members who need this the most. The election's going to really like sit in the middle of this process like a big mess. And we pushed poor Brittany and Syra. You know, we're like, can we push this event back? Is there any way we can push it back? And I, you know, like we knew that, you know, already between the debate and other things, you know, the election is going to sit center stage for so much of our community's dialogue, and it's going to affect everything because we know a lot of community development in Western New York is driven by state funding. State funding in this case is going to be driven by what's happening with the federal economy and that relationship. State funding affects local funding. And everything, the incentives we use to do development in other spaces. It's not that that's the only pathway forward, but it has a huge influence on our community. So we're going to work today to try to accomplish two things. One, again, talking about those projects and those opportunities in the near term to help address the COVID recovery and how we respond to the need for work and income and support in our local neighborhood level in a way that feels authentic and healthy and constructive and equitable. And also, what are those things that we can begin working on now, given that development is a really long process, so that we're in a better position. It's not just that one shot in 2021, but that we're really building the infrastructure and the community capacity to lift up projects that we can move forward into 2022. So we're taking the long game. We're trying to augment what happens in the public and the private development sector so that we can really start to change the landscape and really reinforce the great work that's happening at neighborhood levels. So that's my gig.
Thank you so much, Julie. So it's an exciting time, you know, there's a lot happening. It's an overwhelming time, certainly, but definitely, you know, a time to be having these conversations.